Imagine waking up one morning, looking out your window, and your nation's capital is literally on fire. I mean, the White House, burning. The U.S. Capitol, completely engulfed in flames. The President of the United States is literally fled into the night. It sounds exactly like some crazy, chaotic scene pulled from a modern war movie, right? But this actually happened over 200 years ago. In August of 1814, British soldiers marched right into Washington, D.C. and just systematically set ablaze America's most important government buildings.
So it really begs the question, how did the world's newest democracy come so perilously close to total collapse? It is a staggering reality to confront. This was a moment that tested whether the United States would even survive its infancy, let alone become a global power. Okay, let's dive into this explainer and see exactly how we got here, and how this seemingly forgotten conflict fundamentally forged the American identity we know today.
Section 1. The Road to War.
Right, so let's set the scene. It's the early 1800s, the pacing of the world is accelerating, and Europe is entirely consumed by the Napoleonic Wars. Great Britain and France are locked in this massive, continent-spanning struggle for global dominance. Now, the United States officially declared neutrality. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. But, well, staying out of a colossal geopolitical fight proved to be pretty much impossible. The U.S. gets hopelessly dragged into the chaos through a practice known as impressment. Basically, Britain's powerful Royal Navy was just relentless on the open waters. They didn't just stop American ships from trading with Europe. No, they actually boarded them, captured thousands of American sailors, and forced them against their will to serve in the British Navy. Just imagine the absolute outrage this caused across the young American nation.
So tensions hit an absolute boiling point, really fueled by three main triggers. 1, those crippling Royal Navy trade blockades. 2, the blatant impressment of American sailors we just talked about. And 3, American settlers pushing westward firmly believed the British were actively supplying and supporting Native American resistance against U.S. expansion. Finally, President James Madison decides enough is enough. On June 18, 1812, he officially declares war on Great Britain. And strangely enough, a lot of Americans actually expected a quick, easy victory.
Section 2. David versus Goliath.
Spoiler alert, that dream of a quick victory was a total illusion. The harsh, incredibly difficult reality of the conflict set in almost immediately. I mean, entering this war was the ultimate mismatch. On one side, you have the United States military. We're talking a small army, a shockingly tiny navy, completely plagued by poor leadership, lack of training, and massive supply problems. In fact, early American invasions into Canada completely failed. And on the other side, the British Empire, possessing the massive, globally dominant Royal Navy, packed with battle-hardened, incredibly experienced troops who had literally been fighting across multiple continents. Talk about an uphill battle. But in the midst of this incredibly bleak picture, the tiny U.S. Navy somehow managed to shock the world. American frigates suddenly found themselves engaging in these highly dramatic naval battles. One ship in particular, the USS Constitution, earned absolute legendary status. Get this, during a fierce battle, enemy cannonballs literally appeared to bounce right off its thick wooden hull. No way, right? The ship earned the iconic nickname Old Ironsides. And while sure, it wasn't enough to instantly win the war, surviving point-blank cannon fire provided a desperate, much-needed psychological and morale boost for the struggling nation.
Section 3. A City in Flames.
Okay, let's jump to August of 1814. Britain had successfully defeated Napoleon in Europe, which meant they could turn their full military might across the Atlantic. They sent their most experienced troops straight to North America, and a very real sense of impending doom settled over the capital. The situation just deteriorates into sheer chaos. The American defense entirely collapses at the Battle of Bladensburg. Utter disaster. By the evening of August 24th, it's so dire that President Madison and his government officials are forced to flee their own city. The British march right into the nearly empty capital and systematically set fire to the White House, the Capitol building, the government libraries. For one terrifying night, the Capitol became a city of flames. But then, in a profound twist of historical irony, on August 25th, a massive, totally random thunderstorm strikes the city. I'm talking torrential rain that actually extinguishes the flames and essentially forces the British troops to retreat. Nature itself stepped in to save the city from total destruction. You really couldn't write a better script.
Section 4. The Star-Spangled Banner.
But the British weren't finished. After leaving the charred remains of Washington, they turned their attention north to Baltimore. And really, only one major obstacle stood in their way: Fort McHenry. On the night of September 13th, the British unleashed absolute hell. They launched an all-night bombardment of the fort. We were talking about hours upon hours of relentless, deafening British rockets and cannon fire completely lighting up the dark sky. The sheer explosive power raining down was terrifying, and honestly, the survival of the fort was heavily in doubt.
Now, watching this horrifying display from a nearby ship was an American lawyer named Francis Scott Key. He spent that entire agonizing night just wondering if the fort had fallen. Would the American defense completely crumble? But as dawn finally arrived, the thick smoke slowly cleared, and standing proudly, miraculously, above the battered fort was a massive, completely undamaged American flag. Inspired by this incredible moment of survival, Key grabbed a pen right there and wrote a poem. "Oh, Say Can You See" by the dawn's early light. That poem, originally titled Defense of Fort McHenry, became the Star-Spangled Banner. Out of one of America's absolute darkest nights came its greatest unifying symbol.
Section 5. The Forgotten Legacy. So how does it all end? Well, it builds to a truly bizarre and tragic irony. Over in Europe, on December 24, 1814, representatives signed the Treaty of Ghent. Peace was officially declared. But back then, news traveled across the Atlantic painfully slowly. Neither army in America actually knew the war had ended. So on January 8, 1815, literally weeks after the peace treaty was signed, British and American forces clashed in a massive, brutal fight known as the Battle of New Orleans.
In that ultimately unnecessary but incredibly consequential battle, American troops were led by General Andrew Jackson. Despite being heavily outnumbered by professional British soldiers, Jackson's forces dug in and somehow achieved one of the most decisive victories in American military history. This impossible win against all odds basically overnight turned Andrew Jackson into a legendary national hero, a reputation that would eventually launch him straight into the presidency of the United States.
So what are the ultimate takeaways here? Well, on paper, the War of 1812 ended as a technical draw. No major territorial changes, neither side definitively won. But the crucible of this conflict did something much, much more important. It fundamentally strengthened a unified national identity. It proved once and for all that this young, scrappy nation could survive the wrath of a global empire. It birthed the national anthem that we still sing before every major sporting event today. America went into the war as a fragile collection of states and came out as a solidified nation.
Which brings us to a final, pretty fascinating paradox. If the capital hadn't burned to the ground, would America have ever discovered its true resilience? Think about it. The very moment that brought the United States to the absolute brink of collapse was exactly the trial by fire needed to cement its survival for centuries to come. It's something to think about the next time you hear the anthem or see the flag waving. Keep questioning the history around you, and thanks for joining this explainer.